What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Thursday, May 31st, 2018. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. And we have a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in the control room, ready to answer the phone, put you on the air with your comments and questions. Quick little technical note before we get into the news. If you are using the iPhone or the iPad, you might want to skip the most recent update, because this morning I got up and it said there's a new iOS for your iPhone, and it refused to install, and it took me all morning to get the phone to restore, and it's still restoring. I still don't have a working phone yet, so just might want to pull back and give it a wait for a few days until Apple gets its act together on that. Turning over into the war zones, and boy, there are plenty of them, aren't there? The United States is literally telling the government of Syria not to attack ISIS, that there will be repercussions. This is serious. This is the United States government telling the government of Syria what it can and cannot do on its own soil. The U.S. is issuing orders to a nation whose leadership has never invited the United States into their country or granted permission for it to be there in the first place. And the U.S. government is standing there saying, don't you hit ISIS. Don't you dare attack ISIS. Really? It wasn't all that long ago when the United States was telling you and I and the rest of the American people that we had to be in Syria to get ISIS. ISIS were the bad guys. They made really bad special effects videos about beheadings. They're evil. And now you have the United States government literally telling the government of Syria not to attack them. Talk about living in the twilight zone. Okay, Bashar al-Assad is saying he's glad things are backing down in Syria because apparently they did come very close to direct conflict between Russia and the United States. And that's certainly something that Russia did not want to see happen. I'm not even sure the United States is ready to take on Russia head to head. Even going back to the original Cold War in the 1950s and 1960s, the only time we came close to direct conflict between the U.S. and Russia was the Cuban Missile Crisis. All the others were proxy wars, places like Vietnam. So it was very, very dicey. But Russia's in there now saying that nobody but Syrians should be in the South deconfliction zone. That's a direct message to the United States. Iran is not happy about being asked to leave, but as Iran keeps pointing out, Iran does not actually have soldiers in Syria. They have officers who are acting as advisors and trainers, but they don't actually have troops on the ground, despite what Israel has been claiming in between rocket launches. Anyway, we were talking about a week ago on how there seems to be a grassroots uprising against the American presence in Syria, a real, genuine, if you will, color revolution. And apparently more than 9,000 locals from the eastern Ghouta region near Damascus have joined the Syrian Arab Army and several pro-government groups since the liberation of the area on April 14th. Now, this is coming from the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, which is sometimes questionable. They haven't actually been in Syria. It's a one-cottage operation out of England, and sometimes some of their reporting can be a little inaccurate. But according to this, the Syrian Arab Army is enjoying a recruiting boom, and they may need it, because it is very obvious when you have the U.S. government in there telling Syria, don't attack ISIS, that the U.S. is not planning on leaving. The U.S. is still building new bases basically looking at breaking a chunk of Syria off, balkanizing the place, going to break off the Golan, give that to Israel, break off the area over by Iraq and give that to the Kurds. And Syria's not going to want that. So the war in Syria is likely to continue. And it's been 7 going on 8 years. And the mighty United States has not succeeded. And they're not likely to succeed in the future. And that the awareness of this potential for the United States to go on mucking about in Syria's internal affairs is probably why people are signing up for the army. I mean, let's say that, for an example, Germany just came into the United States of America, started blowing stuff up, justified it by saying, we're fighting terrorists, but we don't want you to attack the terrorists. I think you would probably see a lot of Americans saying, yeah, it's time to join the military here, because the Germans don't have any business being on our soil telling us what to do. So, anyway, we're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. Now, one of the reasons the United States may be telling Syria to back off on ISIS is because there are so few of them left. And Israel is in a bit of a quandary here because Israel justified their intrusions and attacks on Syria on the basis of ISIS and al-Nusra and Iran. And it's turning out those excuses don't really fly. It's like Netanyahu. They're running out of aged Nazis to wag at us to get more money and weapons. So Israel doesn't know what they're going to do. How do they justify continuing to occupy and steal the Golan Heights when it's very clearly a violation of international law? As you know, there's another Freedom Flotilla that is on the way toward Gaza, and there are Gaza boats that are attempting to run the blockade, primarily to get some of these people who were grievously wounded by the Israeli army at the Gaza border, these unarmed protesters who were shot with these expanding bullets. And Israel continues to intercept them at sea and turn them back. And apparently the latest attempt was stopped about 9 miles from the coast. Now, there's a problem with that, because according to the Oslo Accords, which Israel did sign, the Gazans are allowed to go 20 miles out to sea, but Israel has never complied with that particular condition of the Oslo Accords. Actually, they pretty much ignored all of the accords. Their idea of Middle East peace is, we want a piece of that Middle Eastern country, and we want a piece of that Middle Eastern country, and we'll take a piece of that one over there. And then maybe we'll be happy. No, they won't. They'll want another piece. They want the Israel described in the Torah or the Old Testament, Eretz Israel, from the Nile to the Euphrates. Now, a little bit of positive news coming on out. Apparently, senior Taliban officials have been in secret negotiations with Afghan officials on a possible ceasefire and end to the hostilities. Now, this is coming from U.S. sources. This is General John Nicholson. And obviously, it would be nice if we could stop at least one of these wars. It's going to be a little bit tricky, though. I mean, obviously, the U.S. is going to want to continue that pipeline operation, which was the cause for the whole war initially to begin with. But at the same time, you've got the Taliban, who are adamantly opposed to opium and heroin. And they're going to want those fields to be burned. So the negotiations may be a little bit tricky. Obviously, the American drug lords want the opium to continue to flow. The American pharmaceutical corporations want the opium to flow. They've gone to a tremendous length getting American patients addicted to opioids. And they need to keep up their supply, keep making money off of all this stuff. But it would be nice if at least one of these wars got shut down. Malaysia has waded back into the loss of the Malaysian Airlines Flight 17. As you know, this so-called international investigation has come on out and declared that it was a Russian-made Buk missile that took the aircraft down. Now, the investigation itself is not assigning blame because both Russia and Ukraine have the Buk missile. Ukraine got them from the old Soviet Union, and they do have a bit of a lifespan on them. But of course, the media and the West are out there saying, oh, there's no question, Russia did it. Russia just decided to kill a civilian airliner for no gosh darn good reason at all, just so we can point our fingers at them and say that they're evil people. Now, Russia provided all kinds of information, radar data, technical information on the Buk to compare with what they found on the wreckage of the aircraft, which, by the way, wasn't even looked at for like weeks. By the time the investigators actually got to the crash site, it had already been stripped by souvenir hunters. Also, this so-called international investigation refused to share any of their data back with Russia, the accused and aggrieved party in this case. So now Malaysia has come on in and said, according to their investigation, there is no evidence that Russia is to blame for the collapse or crash of the plane over the Donbass. And this is coming from the Transport Minister of Malaysia, Antony Lok. And he said his country does not see there is any convincing evidence that Russia is responsible for the shoot down of the aircraft. So right now the blame, Russia is coming from Australia and the Netherlands. Now, I explained yesterday what I think happened. I don't think it was a surface-to-air missile. I think that passenger line was shot down by a warplane that was aiming for President Putin's presidential jet, which was in the same area at the same time on its way back for a 6-day trip to South America. And the planes are about the same size, and their paint schemes are very, very similar. Somebody who's out there getting ready to shoot down a head of state over a war zone could easily get them confused. And there was that one story from this worker at an airport, how a Ukrainian warplane took off, fully loaded, came back with a missile missing from the rail, and the pilot was shaken, saying, I got the wrong plane, I got the wrong plane. And that was all covered up and hushed up, and nobody ever heard from anybody ever again. This little stunt that Ukraine has pulled, faking this journalist's death, is rapidly increasing tensions. Ukraine initially came on out and said the journalist had been killed. Oh, it has to be Russia. Russia's running around the world assassinating people left and right. Russia denied any involvement. Then it turned out this journalist was actually still alive. And so now Russia is saying this is obviously a political provocation, and that's exactly what it was. Now, there's some good news coming on out from Congress. The U.S. House passed a bipartisan amendment authored by Representative Keith Ellison that reasserts Congress control over the war-making authority. And basically, the House has passed this. We presume the Senate will pass it, hopefully with a veto-proof majority. And if it goes all the way through, basically it restores to Congress the authority to decide where and when we go to war. And Keith Ellison specifically says, we have to take away the authority for President Trump to declare war on Iran all by himself, because it's pretty much obvious to everybody that's where he's headed. That's where he's being goaded by Sheldon Adelson and George Soros and Benjamin Netanyahu. I don't think he'll send his own kids into the battle zone, of course, here. Over in Korea, Mike Pompeo, well, actually, the meetings are happening here in the United States, but Pompeo and a North Korean official have concluded their talks. And the interesting thing about the headline coming out of the Washington Post is the talks concluded abruptly, which suggests that maybe they didn't go all that well, Although if you're watching the corporate media, we're getting all these announcements about how there's absolutely no daylight between North and South Korea and Japan on how we're going to resolve all of these issues. Actually, there is. There's a big one. What Donald Trump means by denuclearization and what Kim Jong-un means by denuclearization are worlds apart. Donald Trump is going in there to say North Korea has to get rid of all their bombs. And Kim Jong-un is basically going on in there saying everybody's got to get rid of their bombs, at least in this part of the world. So that is going to be a difficult situation. Plus, of course, North Korea is well aware of the recent U.S. history. Every nation that gets talked into surrendering its weapons of deterrence gets attacked. And I'm sure that has to be running through the minds of Korea's leaders and Kim Jong-un's advisors. And one of the reasons this meeting between Pompeo and this North Korean official may have ended abruptly is because apparently the CIA pulled a fast one. And they leaked a report to one of their media assets. And the CIA's report said that North Korea does not intend to give up its nuclear weapons anytime soon. And the timing of the leak is obviously suspicious. It's sending a message. So the CIA, at least, wants the war to go on back on. That's where they're going with all of this here. Russia has issued a statement. This is coming from Sergei Lavrov. Russia is saying they will support any concrete agreement that benefits all parties of Korea peace talks. Now, this may sound like your typical gratuitous statement for the world stage. But what Russia is doing is they are sending a message to the United States, okay, not to expect a totally one-sided deal, that North Korea has to benefit from the negotiations. And it's a recognition that of late, the United States has acted like a bully. They don't negotiate. There is no diplomacy. It's basically Pax Americana enforced by American weapons of wars. So Russia is definitely sending up a signal here that they're expecting the United States to make concessions for the benefit of Korea. Okay, let's see. And all right, I got to do that on the next commercial break here. Okay, Defense Secretary Mattis is now announcing that American warships will continue to confront China over its militarization of their man-made islands in the South China Sea, where Beijing has established an extensive military presence in the region. And they're out there trying to say, well, China said they weren't going to do that. Well, China didn't have a reason to do it until you had the Philippines and Vietnam backed up by the United States saying, well, forget the Cairo Convention. We want those islands and we want the oil and gas underneath them. That's what started this all. You look at all of these areas in the world that are under contention, that are dealing with all of this stuff. And it all goes back to somebody grabbing somebody else's property. Now, even though NATO is called the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, apparently they're talking about bringing Colombia into the alliance, and that in turn signals a potential war with Venezuela. All right, we're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and let's take a look at some of our domestic politics. There is a lot of information floating around now about Spygate. That's the name for it. And obviously, official Washington wants it to go away. They'd rather you were paying attention to Roseanne. But it is out there. and people are looking at it. And the indications are it is a huge scandal. There is no question. This is way beyond Watergate. And it does need to come on out. I've been doing what I do for almost a quarter of a century. But right now, this time, 2018, getting into June, is probably the most important time for everyone to be a truth activist and get this stuff out there. The powers that be are hoping that you're just going to forget about it. Oh, there's a ball game on this weekend, or we're going for the picnic, or, oh, that gosh darn Roseanne. Corporate media is going to be in major distract mood. But you need to look at it. You need to basically form your own opinions about what's been going on here in this country, and you need to share that with your fellow Americans. Because that's the only way it's going to get on out there, and we really need your help to do that. By the way, before we get into more news, I did want to remind you, going back to the commercial break and the Front Sight Academy promotion, just a reminder, this is the last week where you can take advantage of it. It was supposed to end on May 5th. It was extended to June 2nd. That's the end of this week. So if you've been just thinking about taking advantage of this deal, this is the time to act. And there is a link at the top of the main What Really Happened page that goes directly to the promo page at Republic Broadcasting. And there's another link that goes directly to the Front Sight Academy, so you can take a look and see for yourself what a cool facility it really is. Okay, now, Ron Paul is out there with an interesting observation, saying that political correctness is trampling the First Amendment. And he's absolutely right. Political correctness is attempting to trick us into imposing self-censorship. And they start with issues like you can't be racist, you can't be sexist, you can't be this, you can't be that. And then slowly they're working toward an environment in which it's politically incorrect to say almost anything that might challenge the official agenda. And so Ron Paul is right. If we're going to preserve our right to freedom of speech, we have to just forget political correctness. You can't have freedom of speech without offending somebody. And if you understand that you're going to offend somebody anyway, then go ahead and speak your mind. Okay. Trump is in a very pardoning mood. Apparently, he pardoned Dinesh D'Souza, who pled guilty in 2014 to violating federal campaign finance laws, and he's considering commuting the sentence of former Illinois Governor Rod Blagojevich and even Martha Stewart. Well, Donald, as long as you've got that pen out, may I add Leonard Peltier to that list and Mumia Al-Jabbar. I think it's time to correct some very obvious wrongdoing that was done in both their cases. All right. Over at CNN, they have this personality, April Ryan. She's a White House correspondent for American Urban Radio Networks and a frequent panelist on CNN. And she went on ahead and posted a link to a story on this African-American-centric website called The Root that actually accused Trump and Sessions of being involved in the trafficking of children. And April's getting a lot of flack for that, understandably. It's a ridiculous site. I know there's a lot of child trafficking out there. But I saw this story, somebody sent it to me and I said, no, this is just somebody, putting fake news out there. You have to be very careful that you're getting your stories with some kind of hard, verifiable evidence or a second source, because there's a lot of fake news being put on out there. Anyway, it may be for reasons like this that CNN's ratings continue to collapse, and Fox News is the cable news champion. for this month, pretty much. The month is pretty much over. They're tallying up the numbers. And Fox News has extended its run of consecutive months at number one to a staggering 197. Fox News has now beaten every other network in basic cable for 23 months straight based on total day ratings. So CNN is in serious, serious trouble, and having people like April put out this bogus nonsense is not going to help them. All right, we're going to take another break for commercials. We'll be right back after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and let's get on back to Spygate. Now, the Department of Justice and the FBI, and for some reason even Trey Gowdy, I'm scratching my head over that one, are trying to portray the role, if you will, of Stephen Halper as somehow legal and justified and a normal part of investigative work. But this guy was paid like $1 million to do what he did. And he wasn't just spying. Apparently he was part of an entrapment operation. And now it's coming on out that he was also a leaker. And he was leaking information that he obtained from within the Trump campaign and transition teams to the Wall Street Journal. And Halper was also one of the anonymous sources pushing the idea that Michael Flynn's had relations. All right, let's talk about the economic news here. You've probably seen all these commercials for the realtor Zillow. They're nationwide. They're rather well known. They are concerned that we may be looking at a housing recession by the year 2020, year and a half from now. And it could very well happen. We could see another real estate bubble burst. We could see a repeat of the whole subprime mortgage disaster. Because if you look back at the history of Wall Street, they never learned from their mistakes. They run up a bubble, they make their money, it crashes, the taxpayers cover it, and they just rinse and repeat. They're not given an incentive not to behave this way. And unfortunately, of course, Donald Trump has just removed even more regulation from them. Some of the stuff that was put in by Dodd-Frank. Wall Street does have to be regulated because everything they do has a direct impact on the lives of every single American citizen. Now, people are talking about what's going on with the inflation. What's the real rate of inflation? And we know that the government figures are untrustworthy. So there's this article over at of2minds.com where they're talking about a burrito index. In other words, you measure the rate of inflation by how much a standard item of food has increased in price over so many years. And I saw this done once before with what was called the Big Mac index. And giving my age away here, I remember when the Big Mac first came on out, first of all, it was a lot bigger, and it was less than $1. So that's a clue about inflation. But basically, this article is saying that the real rate of inflation is roughly 3 times higher than the U.S. government is admitting. And we know that one reason for that disparity is the fact that in the government's calculations for inflation, what they leave off is fuel and food, the two commodities where inflationary pressures show up first. Okay, we're going to take a phone call here. Joe in Tennessee. Aloha, Joe. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Guy Trey Gowdy, as a Facebook, internet gorilla for the election, I've been keeping my eye on this guy for a long time. There's a lot of Trey Gowdy propaganda out there. There's been for 2 or 3 years. Back even when Obama was president and they were looking into Benghazi. And I always wondered, why does this guy have such a good, public relations thing going for him? And now it all makes sense. He's been a deep state, sellout for, one of these guys that has an investigation and leads it right off a cliff for 4 years. And I always used to post on these boards where it was like Friends of Trey Gowdy and all this stuff, I'd always say, show me one of his victories. You know, he's another one of these guys that, you know, they promote, and all they are failures. You know, they talk and they act like they're tough, but meanwhile, when it comes down to it, they always surrender to the FBI and the institutions. So once again, I see the brilliance of Trump in that he's letting these people just string themselves. He's letting them bleed out and expose themselves. Trey Gowdy's, he's mud now. Everybody now sees that what he is. That, you know, he's been exposed. Just like I called you last week and talked about the apocalypse being the great unveiling. He's the guy that's just totally unveiled himself now. You know, even his cheerleaders aren't going to cheer for him anymore after what they see. This is the most ridiculous thing that he's ever said about informants, and he should be glad. What a joke. I mean, does he really think the American people are that stupid?
Apparently.
And the whole deep state. Well, the whole deep state, it's amazing to watch them destroy themselves. They are literally destroying themselves. Trump is sitting there. He's got all the NSA intercepts. He knows all about Clapper trying to get rid of Admiral Rogers. All this stuff is just slowly going to come out. And it's just wonderful watching these deep state propagandists and sellouts just go wave after wave onto the barbed wire and destroy themselves. It's the most amazing thing I've ever seen. And if they had any sense, they would have, you know, got rid of the bad guys months ago, but they just seem to go more and more. It's like they're very self-destructive. It's like, no, it's mindless. Trey Gowdy he wasn't going to run again anyway, but his pants are down. He's looking like a fool for the world to see. It's just amazing. So the other thing I wanted to say is I think Trump, I'm starting to, I was mad about Sessions, but I think this is all a strategy. I think that they're, watching their enemies just expose themselves as part of Trump's grand plan. And I think they're just sitting back and just, letting them make complete idiots. I mean, the media, CNN, they're all like destroying themselves, and he's just kind of toying with them like a cat. That's with a mouse, and it's just like
I think you give him too much credit. I think you're giving Trump too much credit for deep thinking. And to be very honest, I think Trump has just decided he's going to be a single. Well, no, he's got a 2020 campaign going, so he's seriously going to run again. But yeah, he's just proving to be a weak leader, and he's being pushed around by his advisors. He hired all the wrong people into the White House. Instead of draining the swamp, he brought the swamp inside the Oval Office. And as far as Trey Gowdy's concerned, this is not the first time I've kind of wondered what's really going on. Because there have been times before where it seems like he's right on the edge of being able to prosecute or indict somebody, and then he pulls back. And I know he's going to retire from Congress. He wants to go back to being just an ordinary prosecutor. But yeah, it's like I'm starting to think that, the fix was been in all along. I mean, for Trey Gowdy to look at Stephen Halper, who was paid $1 million to spy on the Trump campaign, and say, this is a normal part of FBI procedure, that's really... That's the shark right there.
Well, there's something that, like I said, I've found fishy about this guy for years, and the fact that he had this cheering section on Facebook. I always wonder, what other congressman has got all this propaganda behind him? It must be being supported by the deep state and part of the left-right baloney stuff. He's one of their assets. I'll never forget with who is that guy from Utah, that senator, Orrin Hatch, back with the Waco stuff. And he said, we can't have the public lose faith in the FBI. And I think that you're seeing all these deep state guys rallying around the FBI and the institutions. What they don't realize is that the crimes that they've committed, that some of these guys are so bad that they can't cover them up. And Trump's got them. He's got all that down. He's the president. He can read all this secret stuff. And I do think Trump is brilliant. And I think there's more to Trump, like I said before, from an aspect of the apocalypse and just the times going on. It's like George Washington. He'd go to battle and people would be shooting at him and the bullets would just miss. And I see that with Trump. I think he's very smart. I mean, he's a billionaire. You don't become a billionaire developer. And I agree, he's got, slick friends and, probably dealt with the mob.
Yeah, I mean, he was born into a wealthy family, and don't forget, he's gone bankrupt a couple of times as well. So I don't know how brilliant we should consider that. He got helped out. I think Sheldon Adelson bailed him out at one point, and he owes all those people favors. I got to tell you, I'm very disappointed in Trump. I was hoping we were finally going to have a real outsider to clean up Washington, D.C. We didn't get it. And like you...
Well, I mean, it's going to take time. When...
I'm not seeing anything happen. I'm sorry. I'm not seeing anything happen. And call me frustrated, but it looks to me like it's still business as usual. Everybody covering each other's rear end, and nothing's going to get done. They have got so much evidence against the Clintons over the Uranium One deal. Why is nobody being indicted?
I agree with you on that, but at the same time, he's been sabotaged. He's got an independent counsel on his butt. Meanwhile, he's got us at a peace treaty possibility with North Korea. There's a possibility that all foreign nations are going to get out of Syria and maybe leave the Russians in there. I think that's what this whole thing with Israel and Iran is Israel wants Iran out of Syria, and then because otherwise it'll be a huge defeat for them. So if Iran leaves, they won't support ISIS. I see things working in a real good direction there. I was really upset about the bombing that happened a couple months ago, but it was very limited. And then I see what's becoming of it, and it might, I think I was a little alarmed for nothing. And at the same time, I see a lot of progress. And I remember even when Obama was president, I didn't like him, but I thought, I could understand people voting for him over McCain. And I told people, I said, you got to give him, if he's a real renegade, it'll take him 2 years to turn against the deep state. And I'm giving Trump that same, and I've never seen a president since Kennedy really go against the deep state like Trump is. And I'm, I don't know, how much more you can really expect. I would say, by the time it's 3 years, if he hasn't pulled troops out and stopped the wars, then but at the same time, he's got a lot of enemies, Yeah,
I know he's got a lot of enemies, but the problem is, Trump really can't wait to start keeping his campaign promises, because a lot of the people who supported him in 2016 are feeling disappointed and let down. They may not even go to the polls this November, and that means the Democrats are going to be a shoo-in to take control of the Congress. And Trump and his advisors have to know that. They've got to do something to reactivate Trump's support base. And nothing is going to reactivate Trump's support base like somebody getting indicted and actually hauled before a judge. That's what we're all waiting for.
Oh, no, I'm waiting for that, too. But, like, for instance, the whole Jerusalem issue and the Iran issue, I don't support that at all. But he did run on that. He is fulfilling his campaign promises. He hasn't locked her up yet. And I've always said, I think locking her up, although I'd like to see it, it's going to probably be politically bad for him. But I want to see the people that swore an oath to the FBI and justice be locked up even before I see her locked up.
I'll tell you what I want to see. I'll tell you what I want to see. Okay, first of all, I'm glad that Trump is repurposing NASA back to technology development, space exploration, rather than pushing human-caused global warming. I like the fact that he's sort of made motions toward closing our borders, although they still appear to be wide open here. I wanted the honest elections he talked about having. I wanted to have a genuine inquiry into the safety of vaccines that he promised us. And yes, I too want the Clintons and everybody else who's committed these crimes surrounding the email server and the Clinton Foundation to be locked up. Okay? And call me demanding, but I'm not going to settle for Trump light.
No, me neither. But at the same time, you have to be realistic in what he's fighting. And I have to say that compared to like Bush or Reagan and the promises of any politician, I think he's actually fulfilled more than most. I mean, it's not even 2 years into his presidency. We've had the tax cut. We would have had Obamacare repeal if it wasn't for the rhinos and John McCain. I mean, he's done the conservative on the Supreme Court. Jerusalem and Iran, he said he was going to do that. Tax cuts, and we're working. I mean, it appears to me like they are working towards locking her up and at least exposing her crime.
It looks like nothing's getting done. Nothing's getting done. Look, I understand that you still think Trump has got potential. Obviously, you and I disagree on that issue. I am tremendously disappointed by him. And yes, I remember that he did say he was going to support Israel and kill the Iran deal when he campaigned. And I didn't agree with that, but I went along with that because the other things that he was promising us were things I think needed to happen, but they're not happening. And that, for me, is really the bottom line. Anyway, Joe, we got to let you go. The phone lines are loading on up, and we're going to switch over to Jim in Chicago. Thank you for waiting so patiently. Jim, what's on your mind?
Well, Michael, first of all, Trump's problem is himself. He's too much of a insecure individual, very weak leader.
Yes.
And there's a lot of things that he could have done from day one, and he chose not to. So Trump's problem is himself. And as far as what the young person who just called and stated he was doing all these great things, I don't see it. I just don't see it. Now, the reason I'm calling in, you mentioned the economy. Michael, I think this might be the year where everything crashes, considering we're going to start the tariffs, I think, starting today or tomorrow.
Yes.
Inflation is getting higher. Interest rates are going up. Student debts are off the chart. Credit card debt is getting worse. So I think this might be the year where things really do fall. And then I read today where the bankers are up to their old tricks again. They're doing the same thing that they did back in 2007.
Okay, yeah. I'm in agreement with you. In fact, to be very honest, I'm surprised the economy hasn't already collapsed, but it's being held together with duct tape at this particular point. But we are seeing all these indicators, retail places going out of business. I wore my ballistic missile T-shirt again today. That store where Claire bought this for me has already gone out of business. And we've got Zillow out there saying there's going to be a housing recession. And if you look at the strain of the war budget on our economy and add to that the fact that the government has just misplaced $21 trillion with a T dollars, you can't have a working economy working like that. Anyway, listen, we got to take another break for commercials. And Jim, do you have anything else you want to hang on?
Well, this is the last question. How come people are not talking about the Bilderbergs? Normally this time of year, everyone talks about...
Stay on hold. Stay on hold. I'm going to come right back to you after these commercials. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to go right back to the phones here. We were talking with Jim in Chicago. And Jim, you had one more question you wanted to ask.
Yes, finally. This time of year, normally Alex Jones and other people would be talking about the upcoming Bilderberg meeting, which is next week from June 7th through the 10th, I believe.
Yes.
And I have not heard a word from anyone. Do you have any comments regarding that and maybe their upcoming meeting?
Well, not really. I haven't heard or seen anything, and it may be because of Alex Jones' previous efforts to infiltrate the Bilderberg meeting that they've ramped up their security to the point where nobody can find out anything, because it's definitely one of the most secretive groups that you're going to find.
Right. Well, Michael, that's it. You take care.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go and switch over to Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, a couple previous callers ago, I was a chump. I voted for Trump, and I'll say it again. If you still think Trump's on your side, you're a chump. The guy wants to pardon Martha Stewart. That's all you need to know. I mean, come on now.
Yeah,
come on.
She's already done her jail time. I mean, she's back out. She's back out making money doing TV and everything. You know, if you want to pardon somebody who's really going to win you some points with ordinary American people, it's like I said, Leonard Peltier. Everybody knows that was a frame-up. He got railroaded. Same thing with Mumia Al-Jabbar. You know, but Martha Stewart, first of all, why? And second of all, who cares?
Mike, but people don't realize, if their pension had IMCON in there, you would have lost money. Martha Stewart got out before you lost money because she had insider trading. Write that tells you there's two sets of rules.
Yeah.
One for them and one for us.
Yep.
Why the hell would you pardon? Trump's garbage. I'm sorry. The dude could have got rid of a lot of people when he first came in. It's already June, Mike. It's June already. He hasn't done anything. He's not going to do anything.
It's June
over.
of his second year is what it is.
Yeah, it's over for him. A lot of your callers even think they ain't going to vote for him again, so it's over for him. And on Trey Gowdy and Jeff Sessions, look, they ain't going to do nothing either.
Nope.
They're sellouts. All the Congress and Senate are either sellouts.
We're just going to have to let it collapse, like the Soviet Union did. And then we'll simply, put a lock around our capital city and say, you guys are not allowed back in. You wrecked the place. You've had your turn. Now we're going to go back to the original Constitution, the first 13 amendments, very strict limits on campaign donations and other ways to restore the republic in a form that would be less vulnerable to corruption.
But we keep hoping, on the fourth year of Trump's term, he's going to do something. No, he's not. Can you hold me over, Mike?
I've given up hope. If he was really going to do something, he would have done it long before now. We're a year and a half into his first term in office. I'm not seeing anything happen. Anyway, Dustin, got to take a break here. Thank you for the call. We're going to do quick station identification, and we'll be back with more phone calls after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go right back to the telephones to Rick in Arizona. Aloha, Rick. Thank you for waiting. What's on your mind today?
Well, I was just hearing all this stuff about Comey and Mueller. Comey and Mueller, they know that Trump couldn't get an ownership gaming license in Nevada because he had too many nefarious connections. So when we start talking bad about Comey and Mueller, they know things that we don't know, but they're too scared to do anything about it. I'm hearing more and more from the same cast of characters that want our guns. They want to stop anonymity on the internet. Now, I was listening to Savage last night, and he said that if you post an Instagram picture, we want your name and address. So did Ben Shapiro, and so did Joe Rogan on his podcast. So these gun grabbers are out there going after your identification now. Take it for what it is. These people are going to turn us all into Palestinians if we're not careful. And thank you for taking my call.
Well, thank you for the phone call. And we're pushing forward to the total surveillance state. George Orwell was right in his warning. We're a little late, but we're living in the 1984 world here. And yes, they want to grab the guns, so we'll be obedient little workers. And they want to have means of identifying and tracking us all over the place. Anyway, let's go to, Kathleen in Paris. Aloha, Kathleen. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. I'm talking about Trump and his accomplishments. And some of the people I listen to seem to think that he's against this human trafficking. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we all know how politicians are controlled is because they have these dossiers where they've partaken with crimes and with children and satanic rituals and things like that. Mm-hmm. And that, in fact, Trump has, in a low-key way, attacked sex and human trafficking and people who are involved in child porn. And you might think that if he's really wanting to take these people out, that this would be the way to do it. And that he would have to be keeping a low profile and sort of spring a trap. I mean, it's not something that you would announce. Okay, we're going after you, satanic ritual people who's drinking children's blood and that. But
okay, now I need to interrupt you here. First of all, First of all, there's no question sexual exploitation of children is going on. We know that unfortunately there's child porn being produced, which I find disgusting. But this whole satanic ritual abuse thing, was a fad back in the early 1990s. And everybody was out there, I'm a victim of satanic ritual abuse, and they had goat's heads, and they did this, and they did that. The FBI actually investigated, and they couldn't document a single case. It was just a bunch of people who saw an easy way to get their face on TV, get their 15 minutes of fame, and it dovetailed rather nicely with the rape hysteria, which turned out to be overblown. So let's keep these separate. We want to talk about child trafficking. That's fine. Satanic ritual abuse kind of discredits the whole conversation, especially when you make comments that these people are drinking the blood of children, which is a really good way to catch some very nasty diseases. But Trump so far, hang on. Okay. I've been looking in the news for coverage of child sex trafficking or human trafficking in general. And it seems like there has been an increase in investigations and arrests at a low level, but nothing occurring higher up, nothing in the Franklin scandal strata.
Right. And, but like I say, I'm just harboring some little hope in my heart that these investigations are going on, and that they're preparing a trap for the people to be, the big fish to be caught.
Well, have you ever read Dante's Inferno?
No.
Okay. In it, he describes his vision of hell, and what is written across the gates of hell I think applies in our current situation. It says, abandon all hope, ye who enter herein. I'm tired of living on hope. And I know there's people who are out there, we hope things will get better. No, they're not getting better. They're getting worse. Things are only going to get better if we make them better. If we sit back on our rear ends and say, oh, I'm hoping things are going to improve. I hope Trump is going to work out. I hope this and I hope that. I hope Superman comes to save us. I hope the Batmobile is parked in my driveway in the morning. You're not going to get anything really done. Anyway, Kathleen, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. We're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And we have a caller from Chris in Las Vegas. Aloha, Chris. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, Michael, you were talking about what you claim is false satanic ritual abuse, and I would recall and remind you concertedly that the McMartin preschool trials in California in the 90s, I think it was, was actually proven to have CIA relations. It was related to the CIA mind control cults. They were actually abducting children, as the children had claimed, from the school, taking them via a tunnel to a house next door where they were sexually abused and taken other places as well. And they had threatened the children by murdering animals that they found remains buried near the school, and threatening them that if that would happen to them or their parents if they were to talk, to threaten.
Okay, well, Chris, let me interrupt you right here. Let us assume for a moment that your description of what happened is absolutely accurate. Then it doesn't count as satanic ritual abuse. It was a CIA MK Ultra operation, and we know the CIA did some really wild things during MK Ultra. They ran this bondage parlor up in San Francisco for something like 9 years, where they hired these sex workers to basically work on customers and drug them with LSD, trying to find the right combination of sex, whips, and acid that would get people to tell the truth. Complete waste of money. They never got it to work, and finally it was shut down. Chris, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go.
I got one more thing for you, Mike. Got one more thing for you if you want.
Is it about satanic ritual abuse? Because I really do want to go on to other subjects.
It's up at the Presidio, California, with Anton LaVey and the Church of Satan, and his followers that were Colonel Paul A. Bilali and Michael Aquino, who had been partners with Anton LaVey and the Church of Satan, and then created their own Church of Set, who later created the 10th Psychological Operation unit in the United States Army that got Satanism approved as a so-called religion in the military forces, and this is part of the problem that we have with deep state embedded in the armed forces and these satanic practices of the dark world.
Okay, but again, what you're describing is military and intelligence operations, masquerading behind all this Church of Satan stuff. And we know that military operations and intelligence agencies will use a wide variety of religious institutions as cover. Anyway, thank you for the call, Chris, and we're going to switch over here to Roxanne in Texas. Aloha, Roxanne. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Good afternoon. I wanted to briefly go over a couple places that the border wall is being built.
Okay.
So if you go over to Sunland Park, New Mexico, and that juts up against Aiea and Anapera, A-N-A-P-R-A, Mexico.
Okay.
So that started construction January 7, 2017. Now, just west of El Paso here in Texas, there's a town called Santa Teresa.
Mm-hmm.
They started on April 11th. But over in California, they're building a bunch of walls outside of San Diego, and the Attorney General, Becerra,
yeah,
is walking, saying, so, it is getting done. And the SWF contractors out of Omaha, Nebraska said their needs are like 300 days.
Mm-hmm.
It is only like 225 miles left to build. So it isn't like thousands of miles. It's only a couple hundred. But if you get blocked everywhere you go with these Democrat towns or states, it's frustrating to everybody. But the border, Ronald Vitello, he's the deputy here, I believe, not here, but I'm trying to think of where, but of the Border Patrol. So he said, we're working on it, and we're doing the best we can. And it's tough because people are, blocking them. People are jumping over. There's a long place, especially near El Paso. It's just like hole, but it isn't even fenced, so you can just walk over. And
well, here's my question. Here's my question. Everybody in the United States who is aiding and abetting the illegal immigrants, transporting them, giving them shelter, giving them work, they're in violation of existing federal law under Title VIII. Why isn't Jeff Sessions starting prosecutions? That's what I want to know.
Well, there's a whole lot going on here in Texas. I know that. Our governor's doing a whole lot here.
Well, good.
Constant. But when people say nothing's getting done, I don't know what reality some people are living in, because things are getting done. Nothing's perfect. This is it's worse than a swamp. But like one caller said, and I agree with that, is bring these people right up into the spotlight and then shine that light on them, and their careers are done. I know it looks crazy, but I think it's a good thing. And there's stuff getting done, and that's all I got.
All right. Well, thank you for your opinion. And we're going to let you go and switch over to Josh in Washington State. Aloha, Josh. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Been a long-time listener. Last time I called you was like 5 years ago.
Yeah.
I just called to express my complete disappointment with Trump. I'm one of the oldest millennials you can get, so like mid-30s now. And yeah, so everything he has done are the things I hoped he didn't do, because I'm very liberal. And none of the things I hoped he did and I voted him for, he has done. The biggest thing I wanted was to end these wars. And I'll never forget the night where I have a 5-year-old. I'll never forget the night where I was looking at my kid and wondering if he was going to die that night because of a nuclear war, because of Trump. And I'll never forgive him for that.
Yep. I'm in agreement. I mean, for me, that was the biggest promise that Trump made, the one that affects all of our lives, that he was going to get out of these military interventions. But he turned out to be just as much a liar as Obama was back in 2008, when he said the first thing he would do as president was end the wars and bring our kids home. And So I'm disappointed, and it seems like we're heading into more wars. I mean, we may see light at the end of the tunnel in Afghanistan. Apparently, they're talking with the Taliban there, but you've got the CIA that apparently is trying to sabotage the possibility of any talks regarding North Korea. So we're going to be going back in there, and you need to look at how many people died when that Korean War first started up, and officially it's still ongoing. Technically, it's America's longest war, and it's still officially ongoing. There's a ceasefire, but you know, it looks like they're going to go in there, and I don't know why. What the CIA wants in North Korea, except that it too, like Afghanistan, is a source for opium poppies.
Yeah, you know, I think at this point, just they're losing control and they're so desperate. It's like a con man where at the very end of the game, they tend to get very, very extreme with their lies.
Yep.
Just so nobody sees the smoke coming from behind them, so to speak. I really think that's what it is. And as far as Trump, you know, I don't know what it is. I mean, he could have been on the inside from the very beginning, and he conned us all, or they got him somewhere once he got in there, like you said, a week later. But frankly, I don't care. What I care about is my son's future. And like I said that night, that was so traumatizing. One thing I told my dad, he so unfortunately supports Trump, is that guy might as well have pointed a loaded pistol at my son's head for that entire night. That's how he made me feel. And like I said, because of that, I can never forgive him. I don't care what he does at this point. I'm not supporting him. And, you know, the funny thing is, he's really pushed me a lot more on the left side of politics I ever thought I would be. I'm currently reading Karl Marx, and I'm reading stuff about communism and socialism. Mm-hmm. And I was raised as a conservative and a libertarian. And, you know, to be honest, now that I'm actually reading about those people, they're not evil. It's not all bad. I mean, the funny thing is the main premise of Karl Marx is the same thing libertarians rail against. It's having the elite class of people control everything. That's what Karl Marx was railing about. Yep. They just had a different solution. So that's what Trump has done for me. I'm way more on the socialist side of the camp, and I get a feeling once my generation becomes the old generation, whatever nation is going to exist here, or nations, they're going to be a lot more socialist than what you see right now. And that's just going to be the pushback for my generations being completely disenfranchised.
Well, you may be right. Me, I'm an old-fashioned capitalist, but the problem is we're not a capitalist nation anymore. We have slipped into economic fascism, where the wealth always flows to the top. And I think given a choice between fascism and socialism, most ordinary people are going to say, well, let's give socialism a try because, you know, I'm going to get a little bit better lifestyle out of that rather than this constant grinding poverty propping up the war machine in Wall Street.
Yeah, totally. And when I say like socialism, I don't mean like extreme, like Stalin, like communism. But I definitely see things changing, like healthcare will probably be public. A lot of other industries that are traditionally private that just really don't work with that model, like utilities, will probably be public. So it'll just be a swing on that side. It won't be extreme. But, I mean, all the people I talk to that are my age or younger, that's just the gist I get from them. Just because of how we are. Like, for my example, I have a degree in electrical engineering. My wife has a doctorate degree in physics, and we live in a 600 square foot trailer.
Yes.
We have never lived in a home because we've been completely disenfranchised. The previous generations, you're an exception. I wish there were more guys like you. They to keep their lifestyle, they've put all this debt on us and my kid. And
I think you're looking at the wrong direction. You know, first of all, it's the government and the military spending that's basically thrown all this debt on the nation, and it's corporate Wall Street greed that has basically sucked away your standard of living. The problem isn't just the debt, it's the fact that wages and salaries have been driven on down so corporations can make more profits. And it was a very foolish thing to do because it means the American people are less able to actually buy the products in the shopping malls. And that in turn has led to a retail crisis. Nobody is really thinking these issues through long term. It looks good now. Let's get, fire all the expensive, experienced workers, and we'll hire some new kids in at minimum wage. And then your customer service goes down, you lose your customers. They didn't really think it all the way through. And if there's one person in the country that we expect to maintain the broad overview of what is best for the nation as a whole, it is the President of the United States of America. And Trump is failing on that one. He's pandering to Wall Street.
Yeah,
he's pandering to Israel. Yeah,
one thing I find odd is when Obama was in power, a lot of times I heard from conservatives, they complained about all the power that he was getting, all the centralized power, the more authorities is given, he is really going over it. And now that Trump is in power, they're making all these excuses about why Trump can't do anything. Oh, it's powerless. It's Congress's fault. And it's just excuses. He is the president of the United States. He could instruct his Justice Department right now to go out and arrest Hillary Clinton. There's nothing stopping him from doing that.
No, there really isn't. I mean, the Department of Justice works for the president, and the president does have the authority to say, we need indictments. Anyway, Josh, going to let you go. Going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to go back to the phones. Dave in Missouri, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, howdy, Mike. I hope you're having a blessed day.
Well, thank you.
I just, my point, and I've made this before, you can't really just lay it on the Waltons from Walmart, the Rockefellers and their politicians, the Clintons and Bushes. Of course, they're going to do what they can to rip people off, to steal everything in sight. There's never been enough. But it actually falls to the American consumer. And that's where the problem began. Because suddenly buying made in China from Walmart was more preferable than supporting your neighbor in your hometown's factories by buying those products, by supporting your children with the future in your hometown, or maybe your downtown, or any economic life in town. So actually, this falls to the individual. Because, of course, you were talking about Wall Street. Well, yeah, they're going to always steal, man. That's what they do. These banksters, they're always going to steal. The American people used to have principles and values. That's been lost now for, what, are we going on 2 generations, maybe?
I would say one generation.
Don't know anything but McDonald's and made it. Yeah, I think you're right. The kids know nothing but buying McNuggets from Walmart and fall apart crap from Walmart, or McDonald's and fall apart junk food. So it actually comes down to the individual. We will not have a nation if the people do not care enough to invest in its survival.
That's
my point.
Okay, I need to cut on in here.
I'm done.
All right. It's overbroad to say this is all the consumer's fault for not buying American-made products. Because when you go into a store like Walmart, you are not given the choice of something from China versus something from the United States. And so, again, that puts the onus back onto Wall Street and corporate greed.
Well, I'm totally with that, except the people lined up, they abandoned their local hardware store, their local clothes stores or shoe stores. They lined up to pay that money for that fall-apart junk, knowing they were going to destroy their local economies. I mean, maybe they weren't smart enough to see it, but they lined up voluntarily to do it. And so really the effort needs to be to re-educate the population, which at this point, I mean, how many of us even believe there's a hope in that? I mean, we're so far down this rabbit hole. This was engineered to destroy this nation economically first, then every other way. It's succeeding mightily, but I always have to go back to, okay, you knew better, but you didn't do better. What, you believed that TV commercial? So it's it's the corporation's fault. No. I mean, we all have to own this. We've all played our part in it, and the only way there's any chance of ever getting out of it is to demand American-made, demand to support our local economies for a future for our children in our hometown, so they don't have to run to hell and high water to find the future, because we have just decimated everything by sending all the money out of town with these corporations. Mike, I love you so much. I'm going to let you go, brother. Keep doing what you do.
All right. Well, thanks an awful lot here, and we're going to take another phone call from Mike in Chicago. Aloha, Mike. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, yeah, I heard you talking earlier about Trump pardoning Rod Blagojevich.
He's talking
Chicago.
about commuting the sentence.
That would be meaning what?
Meaning he gets out of jail.
He ought to give him another 14 years, that's my opinion.
Yeah.
But what did he do? He would, his corruption, he sold Senator Obama's seat, and I think he was wiretapped, and I thought his wife was involved with some sketchy real estate dealings also. Yep. And, furthermore, I thought the Clintons were involved with some type of real estate shenanigans. And what happened, 9/11, there was a federal building that, stop me if I'm wrong, there was a federal building that was taken down, and a lot of evidence may have been destroyed.
Yeah, that was Building 7. That was Building 7. It was
right.
It held federal offices. It had the emergency command post for the city of New York. And, there were several high-profile corruption and stock manipulation cases where the files were in the offices of the SEC in Building 7. And, yes, all that evidence was destroyed, and these people got to basically take a walk on what they had done.
Right, and what makes a building collapse beside demolition that's planned and it planned out and set up?
Okay, Mike.
Anyway, go to your break. That's all. Thank you for the call. That's
all right.
Fine.
Thanks an awful lot. We're going to take a break here. We got more phone calls waiting on the other side. Anyway, welcome back to our show. And before we take some more phone calls, I got an email responding to the caller who was saying it's all the fault of the consumers. It's all blame them, don't blame Wall Street and everything. And the email goes, I don't know how it works in the U.S., but here in Canada, the big corporations like Walmart first went through the politicians in power and somehow got their permission to set up shop. We consumers were not, in fact, consulted on the matter. We were just informed that this decision had been taken. And I remember when Walmart was first appearing, there was a great deal of discussion that this was going to drive the small mom and pop businesses out of business. And that's pretty much exactly what has happened here. Okay, back to the phones here. Lenny in California. Aloha, Lenny. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, yeah, your statement there in the song led right into what I wanted to say. I was listening to your show earlier, and what you said about the bankers haven't learned a thing, I want to say that I beg to differ on that. The bankers have learned exactly something, and that is there will not be any repercussions this time, just like there were any repercussions the last time. They're going to do exactly what they did this time, and the government is going to let them get away with it. In fact, the government is going to help them stick the taxpayers with the bill.
Yep.
All over again, and the people, will not they will not be able to do anything about it, or they will choose not to do anything about it. Now that's up to them. Now, as for the tariffs that Trump put on the German luxury cars, okay, and I can see it now. All of the compartmentalized liberals that love to be compartmentalized on stuff like race and religion and sexual orientation, they always used to screaming Nazi, racist, Trump. But nobody, you're going to find this to be true. You worked in the place, right? Nobody drives such cars more than the so-called liberals in California. Am I correct about that?
Yeah, you absolutely are. And we're beyond tariffs right now because according to this story that came out of Zero Hedge, Trump is aiming directly at Angela Merkel for her resistance to going after Iran. And Trump is preparing, according to this report, and it's from the German magazine Wirtschaftswoche, claims that Trump is going to impose a total ban on German luxury car makers from the U.S. market. So the price of Mercedes-Benz and BMWs just shot through the roof.
And I say good, because if you're going to scream Nazi, then why not be totally anti-Nazi? Why scream Nazi and you're going to try and drive their cars?
Well,
right?
hang on a second. Present-day Germans aren't Nazis. The Nazis lost World War II and ceased to exist.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm not saying that, but you understand what I'm going for. I mean, my thing is that you can't be a liberal to your convenience. That's all I'm saying. All right, but I know that. I mean, I know the present-day Germans had nothing to do with that, and they shouldn't have to be paying for something they didn't do.
I agree.
But moving on.
Yes.
I just want to say that I know, and I missed your show the last 2 days, and I had good reason to. But I just want to say that I don't know if I know you don't comment much on such things, but the Roseanne thing.
Yes.
I've never seen such, once again, hypocrisy in my life. All right.
Yes.
And I remember when Bill Maher called, when Bill Maher called Donald Trump a white monkey.
Yep.
Do you remember that?
I remember
Mr.
that.
Rivera? Nothing was said, nothing was done about it. Okay? Now,
Yes.
I want to speak to the black people, okay, with their compartmentalized selves. What is it about you that you're so full of self-hate that anytime someone mentions the word monkey, you automatically think they're talking about you? And you got to jump up and scream up and down. What is it about you that you have been inculcated with such hatred of yourself that you automatically, when someone mentions that word, you think it's you?
Well,
okay, go ahead.
You're done? Okay, because I have a comment about that. If you go up to a new baby and you can say anything to them with a smiling face, and they'll probably smile back at you, because we have to be taught to be offended and shocked by certain words. We have to be taught to be offended and shocked by nudity. Got to keep those clothing manufacturers and profits. And all of these things are taught to us in order to control us. And right now in this country, racism is being fanned up on all sides to keep us divided against each other. But it's all coming from outside.
Okay.
Yeah.
I agree. We're taking each other right where I want to go to close this whole thing out.
Yeah.
And I agree with you 100% that all of this is being used to put the people at each other's throats so the people don't figure out who the real enemies are.
Yes.
All right?
Yes.
And that is the elite who's robbing everybody, no matter what race, no matter what color, no matter what religion. They're robbing everybody all over the planet. And they're putting people at each other's throats, which takes me to George Carlin, who stated this: political correctness is nothing but fascism disguised as mannerism. With
Yes.
that, I'll let you go, sir.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. And we're going to switch over to Mateus in Canada. Aloha, Mateus. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I like Lenny calling in. You know what? Trump is a white monkey, but so am I. Like, let's be honest about it. We're pretty smart monkeys, is really what's going on here.
Actually,
and
the monkeys who
reality.
stayed monkeys, in my opinion, they were the smart ones.
Yeah, and
I guess you didn't
Trump,
get that was an attempted humor.
Oh, no, say it again. No, say it again. My phone went out.
No, I said, in my opinion, the monkeys who stayed monkeys were the smarter ones. Forget I even tried.
Not gonna argue
Forget I
with you.
even tried.
You're a smarter. You're a smarter monkey than I am, so I'm not going to argue. Okay, so remember when Trump was calling Assad an animal?
Yes.
And then, you know, and I take exception to that. Like, animals are actually completely innocent. They don't have enough high reasoning and self-awareness to be guilty of anything. And being like an animal is not a bad thing at all. It's the humans that we have this higher reasoning, the ability for self-reflection, the ability for moral consideration, and then we do these evil acts against each other and against animals and against nature. We're like, if you're religious, we're serious sinners. If you're not religious, we're in serious moral violation of any philosophical concept of principles of morality. Mm-hmm. Like, we have no business insulting each other, referring to animals, and which makes me think of another thing is that for religious people, the golden rule, do unto others as you have done unto you. Well, the way that we're suppressing animals in the factory farms is somewhat similar to the way that the New World Order and the governments are suppressing the populations. They're calling us human resources. We're in these tax farms, and we're totally being fed chemicals. And it's almost like we're getting what goes around comes around. Or people that believe in karma or something like that. I mean, that's why I am vegetarian, is because I don't think we should be suppressing other species and then complain that we're being suppressed. But about that Walmart story, you made a good point earlier. Before
you move on, because you're hopping all over the place here, I have a somewhat different view of the animal kingdom, and I don't see it as an absolute where humans have all this higher reasoning capability and are capable of certain kinds of thoughts, and the animals in general do not. I think it's a continuum. And I think that there are animals that are very close to us in intelligence and perception, like dolphins, dogs. Anybody who's had a dog and sees them twitching in their sleep knows that they're dreaming. So I do think it's not an absolute. Anyway, you wanted to talk about Walmart.
Well, yeah, my cat of 18 years that totally was in love with me. It was so sweet. She died in my arms, and I was thinking back over her life, and she has never actually done anything wrong in her life, whereas I have made all sorts of mistakes in my life. And I did notice that there was a distinction that the animals are innocent. They can't do wrong. It's like anyway, the Walmart story is that what you made a good point a while ago, that one of the few legitimate purposes of government is to have the long view on our civilization and make decisions that we're unable to make for ourselves. So one of those kinds of decisions would be saying, oh, the long view, do we allow this big community buster, big box store to come in or not? And now, if you leave that up to the consumers, that's one of those decisions that we actually can't make for ourselves. Because if you ask me, for example, hey, Mateus, do you want to have treasury? Yes or no? I'm always going to say yes. And if you ask that to all citizens in a country, do you all want $100,000 of the treasury? We're all going to say yes. The treasury is going to go bankrupt, and it actually wasn't the best thing for the community. So some things you can't leave up to the consumer, unfortunately. We're just this smart monkey society, not that far removed from the animal kingdom. We're selfish, we're greedy, we have self-interest, we can't be trusted, we're corrupt with money, corrupts us.
Well, so, okay, I have a somewhat more positive view, and as I said, I don't see this as an absolute where humans are evil and animals are free of sin because they're not intelligent. Anyway, listen, got to let you go. Got a lot of stuff to cover in the news coming up on hour number 3 here right now. So thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go. And yeah, kind of getting out there. Phone lines are open now. Let's get on back to the economy. So Donald Trump is out there starting trade wars with China, Europe, Canada, and Mexico all at the same time. The repercussions from this will be global. And it's going to immediately result in higher prices here in the U.S. for imported products. And the higher prices are basically paying the tariffs, which is another way for the government to impose a tax on us. It's another form of cash grab in the name of protecting the economy. Now, like so many of the callers who called on in, I would like to see a return to American-based manufacturing and American-based retail establishments. But we're not ready to do it yet. It's not like somebody's going to unlock the door to a factory, go on in, flip on the lights, and production starts on up. A lot of America's factories are just corroded, very dangerous buildings. Much of the machinery has been sold off, either to other countries that are getting into manufacturing, or it's just been sold for scrap. So the factories have to retool. Now, we do have some factories, but we really don't have enough to become totally self-sufficient. Our manufacturing is such an issue. Even the Pentagon is out there saying that in a full-on peer-against-peer war, having to rely on our own manufacturing domestically, we don't have the manufacturing strength to maintain the supply of war materiel. Deutsche Bank's stock has crashed to an all-time low, and Deutsche Bank has issued a statement basically saying that Germany's government might have to bail them out, and basically responding to reports that Deutsche Bank is on the Federal Reserve's secret probation list. Deutsche Bank's been in a lot of trouble, and they've had a lot of their mid-level executives. Remember about a year and a half, 2 years ago, I think it was, a lot of their mid-level executives were dying under questionable circumstances, like falling off of parking structures and so forth. Article coming out of Asia Times: oil and gas geopolitics, no shelter from the storm. And when you're looking at the looming U.S. sanctions on Iran and more sanctions on Russia, it's going to cause an oil shortage. That, too, will drive up prices even more than they're already being driven up by the summer rush. Poor old Tesla can't seem to cut a break. Apparently, I've parked cars in the Brussels borough of St. Giles on Tuesday. Now, at this point, this one is so bizarre. I have to ask this question. We know that cars that have Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and automated parking and so forth and so on can be hijacked remotely. There have been a lot of white hat hackers, security researchers who've demonstrated an ability to take control of a car without even having to be anywhere near it, just working through the cell phone system. This accident is so bizarre. To me, it sounds like Tesla may be the victim of corporate sabotage to give the car a bad name, because I really cannot imagine that Tesla, and this is the Model S again, that it got all the way through development, testing, and production with this many problems inside it, that they didn't show up once before with all the testing that goes on for any new car design. So I don't know what's going on over there. Still love the idea of electric cars. Really wanted to get one when we had to replace the Honda. Couldn't afford that one. And the Teslas look cool. I've seen them close up. Especially like the way the door handles just go flush when the car starts up. That's kind of cool. And I love that really big center screen. Okay, apparently in the Dutch city of Schiedam, there was this axe-wielding man screaming "Aloha Snack Bar," and he attacked armed officers who shot him, of course, and in the melee, the officers had a police dog with them who was killed. So how's that open border thing working on out for you? Okay, we're going to take another break for commercials, and we will be right back after these few words. Aloha America, welcome back to our show here, and we're talking about Europe, we're talking about immigration here. And the open borders agenda has just been a disaster for ordinary people living in these countries that are being mushed toward a one world government. We're seeing it happen all over Europe. We're seeing it happen here in the United States. And apparently over in Great Britain, they have a migrant. He's Egyptian, Karim Majdi, and he claimed he was an unaccompanied child from Syria to get into Great Britain, and just got thrown in jail for raping a schoolgirl. So there has to be some kind of vetting going on. What they're doing isn't enough. We're getting the dregs from these other countries. People who are doing well in their own countries, they don't migrate. We're getting the people who can't make it in their home countries. We're getting fleeing criminals. We're getting people who have diseases and hope that the medical systems in the destination country will take care of them. Remember when Israel went to Iran? They wanted all the Iranian Jews to migrate to Israel. They offered huge financial incentives, and the Iranian Jews said, no, we've got it good here. You know, we've got friends, we've got businesses. One of the world's longest operating synagogues is in Iran. They're in the government. They told Israel, no, we're just not interested. Over in Italy, along with their banking crisis, there is another one forming up. And this is a little bit alarming. As you are aware, the Five Star Movement and League parties are basically going to unite and become one party. Now, they won the elections. They wanted to form a coalition government. The president of Italy blocked it. So now they're talking about going back and having new elections, and these two parties are going to merge and become one single party, which guarantees they will win the election. And their agenda is for tax cuts, to send less money to Brussels, and to close the borders. And this has resulted in a German member of the European Parliament saying that Brussels would have to literally march into Rome and take control of Italy's finance ministry if Italy gets a Eurosceptic government. In other words, they're talking about military intervention for Italy or any other country that starts to think being in the European Union is a bad idea. So we're looking at a potential civil war. You know, forget about Russia, China, Korea, and Syria. We're talking about a new European war, European against European. Got to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Getting on back to Europe, as you know, Viktor Orban over there in Hungary is basically on the warpath against George Soros and his Open Society Foundation, which is really a front for pushing the one world government agenda. And Hungary is putting out proposals to hand out jail sentences to citizens caught assisting illegal migrants. And the legislation is called the Stop Soros Bill by Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban. And basically, it's a good idea. The bill is saying that individuals or organizations that help migrants submit requests for asylum when they are not entitled to protection will be punished with up to a year in prison. I think it's a very, very good idea. I'm sure that Brussels is going to try and find some way, or George Soros is going to find some way to get that undermined. But public reaction to the open borders is building in Europe and here in the United States of America. Now, here in the United States of America, we already have laws that make aiding and abetting illegal immigrants a federal crime. It's under Title VIII. And it's very angry and frustrating for those of us who think that common sense says we should control our borders, that these laws are not being invoked. And that you have these sanctuary city, sanctuary state governors and mayors should be prosecuted under Title VIII, and Jeff Sessions sits there doing absolutely nothing. Okay, over in Great Britain, Soros is mounting a new campaign, Best for Britain, and they're out there on the offensive comparing Brexit to appeasement of the Nazis. That's how far out they are with this thing. Oh yes, Brexit is equal to the appeasement of the Nazis. You know, we've got to think what's best for Europe. We've got to be in a position to protect Europe. Anyway, they're trying to launch a second EU referendum. They're trying to find some way that they can get a hue and cry for a new referendum, which they will rig for the Remainers, because there was a lot of election fraud last time, just not enough. And this appears to be what democracy has become in the 21st century. You just keep holding elections over and over and over again until you can steal the result that you want. Now, one of the biggest Remainers basically has come on in, had a meeting with Guy Verhofstadt and Liberal Democrat, sorry about that, rented lips, member of the European Parliament, Catherine Beater, to discuss an approach to Brexit negotiations that are designed to be so tough that British voters would regret leaving and come knocking on the door to remerge with the EU. So that is their strategy. And unfortunately, as long as Theresa May is sitting there at number 10 Downing Street, they're probably going to get it because she continues to cave in. What Britain needs is a hard Brexit. Put some gates on that Channel Tunnel and just go. What's Brussels going to do? Invade? Now, getting on back to this Roseanne Barr situation, and it got a lot of media coverage. And as that caller mentioned on in, it really underscores the hypocrisy that in the entertainment industry, as long as you're a liberal, you can say anything that's offensive at all and nothing will happen. But because Roseanne Barr is a Trump supporter and a conservative and had a very successful relaunch of her show, she was seen as a threat. And I think they were gunning for her, and they were going to find some way to get that show off the air. She just handed them an excuse with that tweet. Now, as a result, Viacom, Nets, Hulu, and Laugh are all pulling repeats of the show. She is being shunned or banned. And actions have consequences, and right now it's being calculated that ABC television is going to lose $60 million in ad revenue after canceling Roseanne, because it was one of their most successful programs. And now people are talking about a total boycott of ABC completely. Now, I can imagine ABC stockholders are not going to be happy about that at all. Meanwhile, Roseanne Barr's fans are saying she should fight back. She should be talking to lawyers right now about, did ABC really have the right to fire her over a tweet? Now, political correctness, and it's really getting on out there with this liberal agenda. And first of all, we're going to do a shout out to our honor affiliates who are rejoining the network. There was an article that came on out basically documenting that academia, universities, colleges, all very, very liberal, are starting to talk about pedophilia as something that we shouldn't be too harsh on, that it should be normalized. And one example they gave was this book came out in 1981, Perspectives on Pedophilia, published by Batsford. And apparently the book was edited by Sussex University sociology lecturer Brian Taylor. And Taylor, in this book, decries society's prejudice against child sex, that the public has this unfair stereotype that pedophiles are evil or sick people. Yeah, you think. And not too surprisingly, the contributors to this book, Perspectives, which was a collection of articles, were all pro-pedophile. And at least one contributor, National Institute for Social Work Director of Education Peter Wrighton, was later arrested and convicted of child sex crimes. Two of the contributors were members of Pedophile Information Exchange, which is a British pro-pedophile activist group. Now, I'm a pretty, casual guy. When I was younger, I was a wild child. But as I've said many times before, I have some very strong instincts about children. Paternal ones, protective ones. And I think this idea of trying to normalize child sex does cross the line. Now, when you're talking about people who are gay or bi or transvestite or whatever, you're dealing with consenting adults. The reason I think this stuff goes over the line is because children are too young to understand what it is they're being asked to consent to. And a lot of people are going to say, well, it's not really the sex, it's about the power, and I understand that. But the thing is, once you drag a child across that line from their innocence, they never get it back. You're forcing the kid to become an adult way, way, way too soon. Our society is already doing that in a multitude of ways, encouraging them to grow up and become consumers as quick as you can. And I have the opposite view. I think kids should be allowed to stay kids for as long as they can. They'll grow up eventually, unless they go into politics, then they stay children. Apparently, the Counseling and Mental Health Center at the University of Texas at Austin is launching a new program to treat masculinity as a mental health issue. This gets back to that war on guys. And they claim the program is going to help male students take control over their gender identity and develop a healthy sense of masculinity. And basically the program is out there saying they're trying to get rid of all stereotypes, like traditional male gender roles, like being successful or the breadwinner. It really is getting a little silly out there. There's been a new update from the Las Vegas shooting from the Mandalay Bay. And it turns out once again that information was being withheld from the public. Apparently, logs from the Mandalay Bay reveal that Stephen Paddock actually had 3 different women up in that room. The women's names have not been released, but apparently he did have company there. 3 women in the room. Remember, originally they said, oh, he was all alone. There was nobody else there. So it's another indicator we're not getting the straight story on this, which seems to be status quo these days. Here's an interesting little story. Apparently, 2 police officers in Paterson, New Jersey, were sent to a local hospital because of reports of a man who attempted suicide. And the man threw an object into the hallway at the police, and he insulted one of the cops. He was in a wheelchair. The officers grabbed the man's wheelchair, punched him in the face, pushed him to the ground, and beat him so badly he needed surgery. All right. So let's talk about computers and other such stuff going on right now. Facebook is apparently building a $750 million data center sitting right next to the NSA data center in Utah. And a lot of people are scratching their heads and saying, why that particular location? I mean, the local community was already upset with the NSA because that building uses so much water for cooling. It's actually created conditions of shortage. And now Facebook is building their new data center. And I wonder what it is Facebook plans on storing there. They're obviously getting ready to store a huge amount of information. The Office of Management and Budget has issued a report showing that federal agencies of the U.S. government are at a great risk of hacking because security practices are not being followed, passwords are not being changed on routine. It's just very sloppy work, and every time there is a major breach, it tracks back to that. Somebody wasn't doing what they should have done. And so the Office of Management and Budget is out there saying, well, you know, hackers could get on in and get all kinds of valuable data. Yeah, they could. And it's another reason why I'm just wondering why the U.S. government as a whole takes the issue of computer hacking and cybercrime apparently so lightly, you know, unless it's their computers or a major corporation. Okay, let's talk about Ebola. I haven't updated on that for a while, but the situation in the Republic of the Congo is getting serious because for the first time, Ebola is now out in an urban area. And apparently 3 late-stage patients snuck out of the hospital. They thought they were getting sicker when the doctors were treating them. They snuck out of the hospital. They were eventually recaptured. Unfortunately, they've all died, and nobody knows how many people they came into contact with. Now, the city where all this is taking place is right along the Congo River. There's a lot of boat traffic on the Congo River, and a lot of it goes down to Kinshasa, which is the capital. And Kinshasa has an international airport. So we could see Ebola start popping up in other parts of the world. Now, I haven't seen the numbers to know what the lethality rate on this particular strain of Ebola is, but it is very, very serious. A rough guess would be around 60%. The lowest mortality rate was for Ebola reston, which killed monkeys, but humans are immune. The other end of the spectrum is Ebola mayinga. That has a 98% lethality rate. Over in Utah, they're kicking up the vaccination debate again. They have a new law. House Bill 308 was signed into law back in 2017 by Governor Harry Herbert, and it's changed the vaccine rules for Utah students beginning July 1st of this year. And unvaccinated students will be expelled. So they're just pushing that corporate propaganda. And I think we reported yesterday on this story about how, once again, it turns out safety tests on drugs were being faked to get a product out there with the thimerosal. All of these corporations are lying, and one of the reasons I keep trying to teach people scientific method and check your sources is because science can be corrupted by money. Very often is. In the good old days, the rulers would get a priest from the church who would stand there in his robes holding a Bible and say, believe what we tell you to believe. And these days, because religion is on the wane for the most part, they've switched to using scientists who will stand in front of the people wearing a white laboratory coat and holding a clipboard and saying, believe what we tell you to believe. Vaccines are safe and effective. GMOs can't hurt you. The world is warming through human activity, and so forth and so on. So being skeptical is a good thing. And I'm very concerned, I've mentioned this before, that our current education system doesn't appear to be teaching kids how to think, how to analyze, how to use logic, how to work things out for themselves. looking at the Common Core curriculum, it's just more of the same thing. Believe what we tell you to believe, and all will be well. Okay. Apparently, Trump is trying to do something about prescription medications, and he's on the warpath against pharmaceutical corporations who are trying to block generics so that they can jack up prices and cost the American people and insurance companies a lot more money. Now, if you're lucky enough to not be on prescription medication, what I mean by generics is when a pharmaceutical company comes out with a new product, it gets a patent. The patent has a finite lifespan. And when the patent expires, other companies can now make that same medication at a much lower cost because they're not amortizing the R&D costs. And these are what are called the generics. There's still the brand name drug available, but the generics generally cost less. Well, the pharmaceutical companies are starting to think like the Walt Disney Corporation. Remember when Walt Disney got the copyright laws changed so that the copyright on Mickey Mouse lasts forever? Well, the pharmaceutical companies are trying to do the same thing. They want the patents to last forever. They want the generics to go away. They want to be able to maintain a market monopoly and charge whatever prices that they want. And we've seen all of these scandals about things like the EpiPen, where we find out it's actually very inexpensive. The pharmaceutical companies are just charging what they think the market will bear. So Trump appears to be doing something about it. And the FDA has posted a list of pharmaceutical companies that makers of generics allege refuse to let them buy the drug samples needed to develop their products. So, once again, gouge the people, gouge the people, gouge the people, gouge the people. Okay, we're coming up here on another commercial break. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And when we come back from this commercial, we'll be updating about our volcano because things are rocking and rolling down there on the Big Island. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And we're going to spend a little time talking about the volcano going off on the Big Island. Overnight, there was a 4.5 quake at the Kilauea crater itself. And they're basically clearing the area out and saying, you need to get out. It's pointless to stay here. There are going to be more earthquakes. There are going to be more lava flows. Some of these lava spouts are like 200 feet high. And as we reported earlier, if you get hit with some of the spatter, it weighs as much as a refrigerator, and it will break bones. It's an active volcano. What are you doing there? And by the way, it turns out that's become a real problem. I mean, despite all the talk about, oh, it's going to harm tourism, it's going to harm tourism, apparently a lot of people have gone down to the Big Island trying to see the volcano erupt, which it is an amazing thing to see, and they're going past the safety barricades. And so the Hilo police are down there writing out tickets and chasing people back up. But there's a reason those safety barriers are there. And it's a very dumb thing to do. And even when we're not in the middle of a big eruption, every year we'll lose about 12 tourists into that volcano because they think it's cool to hop over that rope and, hey, that ground looks just as solid as the ground I'm standing on right now. So basically the locals are being told this is literally their last chance to evacuate the volcano area. The roads are all pretty much closed. They're using helicopters. They've actually taken a bulldozer in, and they're trying to bulldoze a new emergency road to get around where the lava is. But it's pretty intense down there. A lot of concern about air quality, not just the lava issue, but the sulfur dioxide, the effluents coming out of the ocean when the lava pours in there, which is happening on 3 different locations right now. And the volcano's been erupting long enough now where the sulfur dioxide has kind of swirled back and forth over the region. And yes, we are feeling it on the other islands. My eyes are stinging. It's worse than the smog in Los Angeles, as I recall here. But apparently the lava is still moving very slowly toward the main power facility at the Puna geothermal plant. It's already engulfed one of the wells. So far, no explosion. The big problem is the property damage. And I think something like 80 homes total have been destroyed, along with the obvious environmental damage here. And it's kind of interesting to see the global warming people ignore the fact that when a volcano like Kilauea erupts, it's putting out far more greenhouse gases than human activity ever could. But they want to blame you. They want to guilt you out of money and stuff. Let's see. Lava flow destroys 12 more homes. Kilauea volcano continues exploding. And I was looking at the Hawaii earthquake map, and yeah, there's still a lot of seismic activity up there. And again, on Oahu, we are safe unless one of these quakes shakes loose a big chunk of the island and it falls into the ocean. And then depending upon how big that chunk is, there could be problems for the other islands in Hawaii, possibly the entire Pacific Rim. It is a reality. It has happened to Hawaii before in times long past. And we do know that the area below the rift zone is actually loose. And during big quakes, it does shift. But thankfully, Kilauea is, well, all the Hawaiian volcanoes are shield volcanoes. They're relatively flat, shallow. And so things tend not to slide without being given a good motive. Mostly what happens is you'll have lava form and congeal out over the ocean in what's called a bench. But it's got no support underneath it, and then the bench breaks off, and that can cause a tsunami. I think they had one of those happen back in 1981. So the tourism board, despite having to write tickets for fools who are down there saying, ooh, we get to see a volcano close up, the tourism authority is now out there saying that, yes, people are hearing all these terrible things, but you need to remember the volcano is only happening on this remote part of the big island. And the rest of the island is safe to be on, and the rest of the island chain is safe to be on. And so they're out there trying to basically prevent this volcanic eruption from trampling Hawaii's already very weak tourism industry. So I imagine right now, for those who want to come out here for a summer vacation, you can get some real good deals. Things are priced to move here. Oh, one more piece of idiocy that we've got to deal with here. Somebody actually started an internet meme about toasting marshmallows on the Hawaii volcano to the point where the U.S. Geological Survey has literally had to come on out and issue a warning. No, you do not roast marshmallows on the Hawaii volcano. There's two very good reasons. One, it's really, really hot. And two, the gases coming out of the lava would make the marshmallow, if it didn't burn to a crisp, highly toxic to eat. Where do people come up with this stuff? We got to take a break here for commercials. Do call into the show, 800-313-9443. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And apparently over in the Lake Tahoma area in North Carolina, they had a landslide that occurred next to a dam. And apparently there was an evacuation, and they're now evaluating the dam to see if it was damaged. So that's happening over there. Okay, over in Great Britain, the Church of England, which the Monty Python people love to make fun of all the time, is now urging transgender people to join the clergy in order to honor LGBT plus people. And they're doing this to basically fight back against allegations that the Church of England is homophobic. Now, we're going to go ahead and take a phone call here. Steve in Oregon, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. I have a couple things on my mind. I wanted to talk about GMOs,
yep.
But I also wanted to mention I have a daughter that was born in Italy in 1997.
Okay.
And there was a controversy over her name. And her mother wanted to name her Andrea. But Andrea in Italy is a boy's name. Now, she was naming her after a best friend, a woman that was German named Andrea. That was okay in Germany, but when our daughter was born in Italy, the government got a hold of her and said that they could not name her Andrea because that was a man's name in Italy. So she changed it to Cassiopeia.
Okay.
And that was acceptable. Yeah. So it's been going on since 1997 at least, and it was standard procedure apparently then.
I see that as being very, very silly. But
yeah, they're very traditional in Italy.
Well, it depends on what part of it depends on what part of Italy you're standing on. I mean, in the north in Lombardy, it's almost like two separate countries. In the Lombardy area, very, very traditional, very rigid, very uptight. Down toward Rome, completely different.
Yes, it is. Anyway, my main topic was GMOs, and a lot of people talk about the GMOs, and they go, oh, well, it's perfectly the same. You have the same base pairs as in normal plants that you can achieve through breeding. You have your A, C, T, and G, the adenine, thymine, guanine, cytosine, and those are the same in the genetically modified foods. But the question people never ask, and this amazes me, is they show these little videos of, you just put this DNA in, but how do you get it in there? And the answer to the question is, usually in genetic engineering, they use plasmids or viruses that hook on to the DNA you want to transfer, and they transfer it into the DNA of an organism. Now, maybe you've heard of a virus that you can get, like a cold virus, and it incorporates itself into your DNA, and then it can pop up later and kind of come to life.
Yes.
Well, that's what these plasmids like. So they take a plasmid and they hook this DNA onto it, and then they're able to, that plasmid will go and insert itself into the host's DNA. But the double-edged sword is the plasmid can unhook itself too later and move on and insert itself in some DNA somewhere else. So every time you do this, every time you have something that splices into some DNA, the point that it splices in is part of a protein normally. And now suddenly you've interjected this new DNA into it, so now you're no longer going to be able to code for the protein that was right in that segment, that was coded for right in that segment of DNA.
That's the real problem, because
so it's created
when you cook GMO food, the alien DNA is going to be destroyed. Okay, but the real danger is protein expression. And during the organism's growth, and the fact that it's already been documented that altering the genetic pattern of a life form will often produce unpredictable secondary effects. And nobody's looking for them, nobody wants to see them, they just want the product out there on the market.
Oh, exactly. They don't research what they don't want to be known.
Yep.
And that's why there's kind of a blank area. They kind of don't mention how it gets in there. And then every time it moves, it can create an error, a genetic error of deletion or insertion. It could leave a few base pairs behind that's going to screw up how the whole sequence reads out and how that protein's formed. So every time it inserts, it creates an error. When it leaves, it can take some of your DNA, leave some of its, either one, and cause another error there. Then it moves on to another cell, cause another error there. This is much like the theory of aging, is by successive mutations, by genes not working. You have multiple copies of many genes, but 2, 3 copies wear out. Pretty soon you're out of that function, and you slowly start to decline. It's aging, basically.
Yeah, well, do you know about the telomeres?
The thing is, now, pardon?
Do you know about telomeres?
Yes, they do appear to shorten.
You're born with these telomeres, and they appear to serve a protective function, like the aglet on a shoelace. But through successive generations, the telomeres shorten and shorten, and once they're gone, you start suffering genetic damage. Now, they've been trying to play around with ways to restore the telomeres, but so far it doesn't seem to work in people who lost their telomeres naturally, only in the lab animals where the telomeres were sheared off artificially. So it's a long way off. And of course, if somebody did find a fountain of youth, you can rest assured we'll never know about it because of the population problem.
Oh, yeah.
We'll just have some incredibly wealthy people who never seem to age.
Yes. Aren't we starting to see that now?
Yes.
And but I did want to point out that some of the DNA does survive digestion, and they'll have so some of these plasmids can survive it. I think you mentioned it on the show before because you said now they're finding some gut bacteria that have the GMO DNA in them intact, right? You mentioned that, I believe.
No, we were talking about how the glyphosate that works with the Roundup Ready corn is destroying the gut biome,
right,
and is likely the cause of a lot of chronic medical problems that have just shown up lately, like Crohn's disease.
Sure. And there's a big connection between the gut and the brain. It's a big extension of the nervous system into the gut, too. That's been linked to a lot of other things with dementia and so forth. But some of the DNA does survive into the gut, and they've found in gut bacteria, they've actually found sequences of GMO stuff. So as the GMO is not completely digested, because a lot of it does pass through the digestive tract undigested, and it can be absorbed. And they found some, and I wanted to send you some links on that too, but I wasn't able to before the show. But they found the sequences of GMO DNA in the gut bacteria. And so it's transferred there. Like the plasmid has remained intact enough where it's transferred to the gut bacteria, right? So I'm thinking if it transferred once from the GMO food to the gut bacteria, apparently those vectors are still active, those plasmids. And then what's to stop it from going the next step and transferring then to your cells?
Well, the good news there,
and begin to cause this damage.
The good news is there that the use of plasmids is on the wane right now, and everybody's shifting over to what's called the CRISPR technology that is using RNA to basically work with the DNA, and that actually is a much closer mimic to the way it works in nature than using the plasmids, because RNA is what transmits genetic information to and from DNA in nature.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, scary for me because I see it as getting in the food and some's not completely digested, and then it's going to get in me either way. So I try to avoid GMOs at all costs. But
well,
thanks for the airtime.
There are good reasons to avoid GMOs here, but we do want to keep the science kind of on the up and up here. And let me just do a quick search here.
Yeah, these things do get into the wild. Look at transgene escape.
Yeah.
That's where it escapes intact into other plants in the surrounding area.
Mm-hmm. Well, apparently, according to this, DNA basically is destroyed at temperatures above, cooking temperatures, 170 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cook it well.
yeah, cook it well. Absolutely, okay. Cook it well. All right, Steve,
right.
Thanks an awful lot.
Right.
We're going to let you go here. Interestingly enough, we're still following this story about this transgender boy who's being allowed to compete in the girls' state wrestling. And, of course, she has an advantage and has won the girls' state wrestling title for a second time. And the parents of the other members on the team are very upset. And I'm in agreement. This is inappropriate. There are physical differences between boys and girls, men and women, and simply saying I identify as the other one is not going to change that. And that's the reason we've always had a separation of sporting events by gender, because overall men are larger, stronger, and faster than the women. So it only makes sense. Over at Virgin Galactic, they've had a second powered test flight of their VSS Unity space plane. This is the one that has a crew of 2 and room for 6 passengers that is going to take some very well-heeled tourists up to the edge of space. And yeah, I'd go for it if I had that kind of money. But they've now had 2 powered test flights. It was taken up with its carrier and drop launched. So it seems to be working really, really well. Now, speaking of aircraft, interesting little story out of Louisiana. There's a televangelist named Jesse Duplantis. And apparently last week he asked his followers, or rather told his followers, that God said they should buy him a new private jet, specifically a Dassault Falcon 7X, which costs about $54 million. And a lot of people said, wow, you know, that really is a lot. And Duplantis basically went on to say, you know, if Jesus were alive today, he wouldn't be riding a donkey. So there's a little bit of greed run amok here. Or maybe I'm in the wrong line of work here. What can I tell you? If you are a spam lover, that's the meat, not the emails. And of course, spam is like part of our local culture. There has been a recall issued for 228,000 pounds of spam. It's been contaminated with pieces of metal. Now, if you are a customer of a store where you have a card that identifies you, you'll probably get notified about the recall. But if you're not sure, just be very, very careful. But that's obviously some machine that was packaging the product was grinding itself up at the same time. Interesting little story. Remember Hurricane Sandy? And there was a lot of flooding and a lot of damage, mostly because the storm drains hadn't been cleared of dead shrubbery and other stuff. There was this real estate sign that washed away from the shores of New Jersey. It just showed up on a beach in France and was discovered by a backpacker. And so, yeah, things drift around the ocean a lot. I remember when they were still landing those external fuel tanks off of that away from the space shuttle launches. Claire and I would go beachcombing, and I always had my eye out for little styrofoamy looking things from the insulation. Never found one, though. All right, somebody just posted a member story about how Charlie Manson, his motive for wanting to bring about Helter Skelter, he wanted to kill humans to save the earth. And unfortunately, that is not an idea unique to him. I've seen a lot of these earth firster people saying, oh, there are way too many human beings. We've got to get rid of the human beings. You know, we need to go back to a natural world. And I always get very frustrated because I'm dealing with somebody who themselves is cursed with a lot of self-hate, and they want to take it out on everybody else. And I resent the implication that human beings are not a part of nature. I'm part of nature. Claire's part of nature. You're part of nature. We have as much right to be here as any other life form on this planet. We're also intelligent tool users, which means our computers are part of nature. Our cars are part of nature. And this idea of how beautiful the world would be if all the people were gone, you do hear about it. In fact, Tom Clancy, in his book Rainbow Six, the villains were basically a bunch of ultra-wealthy elites who were going to knock off 98% of the world's population with Ebola and let the world go back to nature, and it was just going to be beautiful for them. And it's scary because there are people who think like that. And Manson was definitely one of them. Okay, let me see what else we've got here. A lot of economic news here. They're still talking about Ambien relative to Roseanne Barr saying that was the reason she tweeted what she did, which I think she was just trying to make an excuse and maybe get ABC to reverse the cancellation. But the pharmaceutical company that makes Ambien is saying, yeah, there are some negative side effects but being insulting isn't one of them. But then, as that caller mentioned the other day, Roseanne Barr is a comedian, and she's used to basically saying outrageous things. So I'm very concerned that we are, in fact, turning into a nation of prescription druggies, and that it is affecting our behavior, and especially for people who are on multiple medications. Next time you see a pharmaceutical commercial, just listen to that disclaimer at the back end of it, and you'll see what terrible, terrible products are being marketed. We'll be right back with the last segment of today's show. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And apparently this idiocy about roasting a marshmallow over the volcano has gone viral. And the U.S. Geological Survey is trying to get ahead of it, saying that no, the sulfur dioxide, hydrogen sulfide will make the marshmallow taste bad. You're dangerously close to lava to do it. The marshmallow will probably incinerate faster than you can pull it out. And something else you need to bear in mind. The fumes coming out of the volcano, in addition to the hydrogen sulfide and sulfur dioxide, there's actually sulfuric acid in there. And if you ever did high school chemistry, you will remember that if you mix sulfuric acid with sugar, which is what those marshmallows are mostly made out of, you get a pretty spectacular reaction. So I know it's Hawaii, and you feel like you're on vacation, and you've fallen for all the posters and postcards that say it's a tropical paradise, and it can be. But we're still in the real world, and real world common sense has to apply. It's a beautiful state. The large cities have all the problems of large cities everywhere. So don't leave your survival skills, your street smarts at home with you. Oh boy, apparently Samantha Bee is now facing repercussions for making a very nasty comment about Ivanka Trump. She's not lost her job. They just cut the comment out of the segment. And now actress Sally Field is trying to chime on in supporting Samantha Bee. And unfortunately, the language involved is so colorful, to put it delicately, I can't repeat it on this radio, or our on-air affiliates would lose their broadcasting licenses. But start to wonder, is anybody left in Hollywood still sane? Everybody's got such a thin skin. Somebody just posted a flashback to 1985 when Don Rickles was at Ronald Reagan's second inaugural. And I was saying just yesterday that if you look at the history of comedy and you look back at what comedians could say in the 50s, 60s, 70s, especially the 80s, today it would be banned. Oh my goodness, I'm shocked. I'm offended. And again, it's another way to try and trick us into a self-imposed censorship. So we've got to grow a thick hide. We've got to buy a helmet, and we have to go back to speaking what's on our mind. Which reminds me that I need all of you to take what you learn at Republic Broadcasting and whatreallyhappened.com and share it with everybody that you know. Because they're not going to get it on the corporate TV news. So, coming up here to the top of the show, and stay tuned for John Stadmiller. I'm sure that, okay, there's a technical error there. The music will be coming, and stay tuned for John Stadmiller. He's got a lot of interesting things to share with you. Please remember that the Front Sight Training Academy program ends this week. As of the weekend, it's going to be gone, and it will not be coming back. So see you all tomorrow. Aloha, America.